Hi, everybody. This is Gertrude Mache again here in Wellington, New Zealand. I have yet another interesting guest by the name of Jill, coming all the way from the United States for the Her Story podcast. How are you, Jill?
I'm great. I kind of tricked you because I'm actually coming from Toronto, Canada.
Toronto, okay. I'll take that back. That's even better still.
But it's tricky because I'm an American who lives in Toronto. Canada.
Okay, so tell everybody who you are, where you're based. You've already told us that, how old you are, and just share your story with us today.
So my name is Jill Kirson, business-wise, or Jill Kirson Tejmola. And I've been living in Canada since 2016. I moved up here with my partner and our son. Prior to that, I lived in Washington, D.C. for 22 years and went to grad school there and worked there. And I also had the opportunity to live overseas. My dad took a job when I was 15 in Paris, France, and not a hardship post. And so the middle of my 10th grade, or my sophomore year in high school, I moved over there, and then I stayed to graduate, and then I went to a year university. Then I went to a year university in Tel Aviv, Israel, then moved back to Connecticut. So don't always tell everyone that, but it's a little bit relevant to the story. And I am 53 years old.
Fantastic. So you have lived a very international life and very, very interesting life, but there is a dark story there from what I read from your bio. Do you want to go into that?
I don't know if it's so dark, but about my mom?
Yes.
Yeah.
I love the way.
I was like, what dark story? Yeah. So, it's really interesting because I don't think about it on a daily basis. And the story is that I can't even remember how old I was. We blocked things out. I'm not particularly good at that anyway. But I think I must have been about 9 or 10. And when I talk about it, I can visualize myself. We lived at the end of a street in Canada. They call them crescents. In the U.S., they call them cul-de-sacs. Yes. So we were the last house on, a suburban road that was, it's much more rural than the suburbs I live in now.
Yeah.
My childhood ended on that day in a lot of ways. And I was doy, walking down the hill. We had a big hill, and then our house was at the bottom of that hill. And there was a big ambulance in the driveway. And I was like, oh, this is bad. And I don't remember exactly what happened, but I remember that my mom was taken to the hospital. I was taken to the neighbor's house, or the neighbor came and got me or took me. I don't remember watching her leave to go to the hospital. Mm-hmm. I remember when she came home, because she didn't get admitted, they let her leave, I guess, with my dad. And my parents were separated at that time.
Okay.
And they got back together, and they just celebrated 60 years of marriage. Although I always tease them that it's not really 60. And so she tried to take her life. And my uncle and aunt and most of our family lived in Philadelphia. That's where I was born. My parents moved to Connecticut when I was 4. And my mom, I guess, called her sister and said, you know, how much of whatever she took do you need? And my aunt called the ambulance in Connecticut from Pennsylvania and sent them to the house. You know, I have memories of finding her crying, you know, and being upset. And, you know, now, you know, I know that she suffered from depression and whatever that was that tipped her over the edge. I think the story and whatever happened along the way was that she, well, obviously you feel like there's nothing to go on for, the pain's too much. That's always the story, right, with suicide.
Yeah.
But I think you know, and hopelessness, but I think it was that my dad was working and living in DC, Washington, ironically, where all three of us, my two older sisters and I, ended up.
Okay.
And you know, he kind of stopped coming home on the weekends, and then he said he wasn't involved with anyone, which of course he was. Yeah, so that's the story. And it's true what I said about yeah, like you're no longer, or I was no longer a carefree kid at that
Yeah.
point.
Life changed completely.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you cope? How did you get through these difficult times?
Yeah, it's such a strange thing because I don't have a clear memory of things close by it, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
is one of our coping mechanisms, I think. Um, you know, but my mom came home, you know, she went to therapy. I have two older sisters. I don't remember if my aunt came or she didn't. My dad helped her. Um, you know, then there was no medication to go on. There's really just Valium, which is, you know, doesn't
Sleep.
increase your serotonin. It just kind of numbs you a bit, right? I
Yes.
wouldn't say numbs, calms you. Um, and that was really what she took. Um, and I remember her not, like, she wouldn't get up in the morning to, you know, help us get off to school. I started kindergarten when I was 4,
Mm-hmm.
um, because I'm a January baby. So that was the deadline then. So they started me. And my oldest sister is 5.5 years older. And literally, I walked half a mile
Oh,
to the bus stop. I always tell people in the snow with no shoes, but that wasn't the case.
that's what it felt like.
Well, it was so stressful because I couldn't keep up. You know, as a tiny little thing.
Yeah. Oh,
And you know, my sister was pissed because she didn't want to take care of me. Um, yeah, so I think she sort of like was checked out there for a while.
yeah. But it all came right in the end.
Absolutely. My
Fantastic.
parents are both still alive. Um, in fact, we're meeting them in Aruba in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Um, and you know, she's happy and healthy,
And it sounds
as
like mom and
healthy as an 80-year-old can be.
got back together again.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? That's so amazing to me. So, you know, the statistics are totally against you. And
Yeah.
he moved out and got an apartment
Oh,
and
wow.
they got back together. But I think, you know, it also really helped because he got the opportunity to take the job in France. And
Okay.
so it was just tabula rasa for all of us, right? No one needs to know your story, right? Because you don't know anybody.
Oh, wow. That's just
So I think
incredible.
that helped. Hmm?
I said that is just incredible that they finally reconnected and here they are 60 years later.
Yeah, it is incredible.
Now, you have had an interesting life too yourself with the career change, the changes of countries. Tell us a little bit about that.
So, I love to learn and I love to study, but my parents kind of have this even Steven thing.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, we'll help you with undergrad, but not with grad school.
Okay.
So I worked my way through 2 masters and a doctorate. Like I'm very practical. And so I kind of figured it out, right? They were like, we're not gonna pay, and I wanted to go, and I got a job working in the legal clinic at American University. My
Okay.
boss was in my international development program. It was a secretarial role,
Right.
serving the student clinicians. And then the second year, because it's a 2-year master's in the U.S., the second year I got an an administrative scholarship. So instead of doing research for a professor, I worked for the director of admissions.
Okay.
And I did survey research for her, Barbara Bell. I'll never forget her name.
Oh,
Amazing
wow.
woman. Yeah, and we were looking at lost accepts. So people who got accepted to the university and then said no. So that financed me the next year. And then I was like, oh, this is awesome. And that's how I got I worked throughout my second master's and doctorate.
So why Canada?
Um, so my husband is from Nigeria.
Okay.
And he took an opportunity up here in telecom. He's now a teacher of little people.
Okay.
So he actually came before me. We were not married or probably 100% committed when I got pregnant. And I was 38 when I got pregnant.
Oh, wow. It was a late
Mm-hmm.
pregnancy, which comes
Yep.
with its own challenges as well.
Yep. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm kind of, obliviously optimistic.
I love
So I was like, awesome, and everyone's like, you have to take it easy. And I had a very big job.
Oh gosh, I love your
Yeah, so,
attitude.
and it's kind of ironic because I think it's a hell of a lot easier to be in a mixed marriage and raise a biracial child in Canada, especially now,
Oh
than
yes.
than in the U.S. So it's funny how life turns out.
Yeah, yeah. So you found yourselves in the right place at the right time.
Hmm.
It is
And
perfect.
now it's much harder to move here.
Hmm.
So I think it was also, I don't think that I could have made that move had I not had the life experiences I'd had before then, because it was
Okay.
already in my scope. Now, granted, you move with IBM, you know what I mean? Like they get your papers and they help you find an apartment and you go to private school, and I was 15, right?
Yes.
But and even when I moved to Israel at 19 by myself, I didn't know a soul, but I was in a university program.
Okay.
And there was, when I was in France, I babysat for one of the lawyers that my dad knew at IBM, and he knew the lawyer in Tel Aviv at IBM. So that was the one person I knew.
Oh, how wonderful. You're an adventurous spirit.
Yes. What do they call that? Like wanderlust. Um,
Oh,
so I think because of that, I was able to, think, oh, well, Canada, it can't be that hard, right?
oh, man. So, what I've been trying to do with this podcast series is to pull out of all the amazing women that I'm speaking to their little nuggets of wisdom or advice that they can give another human being out there. And you've said so much, I'm not even sure where to start, but I'll go back to your childhood and the traumatic experience you had when your mom tried to commit suicide, what would you say to your younger self now that you look back in retrospect at that event?
Wow, it's a great question. Um, yeah, you know what popped into my head when you started talking was whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. but that's a little morbid on the suicide,
True.
suicide story. But whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right?
Yes.
So I would probably tell my younger self, like, literally, you know, you're going to be okay, first of all, and that you can be a kid again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, bad things happen, but it's definitely not as bad as it could have been, right? And you know, I just, when there was that rash of suicides recently, or famous people, there's always suicide, but famous people who committed suicide, like Anthony Bourdain. You know, I reached out to my mom and I was like, you know what? Thank God. Like, I just want you to know I'm so happy that
Yeah.
it turned out this way and I
Yeah.
can still call you.
Oh, that is so beautiful. That is so beautiful. And
Yeah.
you go now to your biracial relationship and another person who could be in the United States right now going through that, besides immigrating to Canada. What advice would you give somebody who's there, who's facing the challenges of being in a biracial relationship?
Yeah, I think that you know, you don't, I like, I kind of say it's not a choice, but of course it's always a choice,
Yes,
right?
yes,
I mean, you can't help necessarily who you fall in love with and who you have that connection with and who you have that chemistry with, but you can make the choice to make a life with them or not. That part's choice. Um, and that um, at in some ways you have to let go of, you know, things that happen to you. And I'm not saying terrible things have happened to us, but things have definitely happened to us.
mm-hmm.
um, that you have to just let go of that and move on, and that it really is other people's ignorance. And then for me, it is a responsibility,
Mm,
which is, if someone, you know, because it's an interesting position to be in, right? Because
yes,
at work or whatever, people don't know that my husband's Black. They don't
yes.
know. And plus, I'm an older mom, so they, you know, don't necessarily think that that's my kid, right? So you face those things that are silly but annoying, right? That they don't think we're together.
Yeah.
Um, that it's ignorance. And I don't mean that in a you ignorant, I mean literally the word ignorance and what it means, that people don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that we all have biases and we all have racism in us,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
In you know, the pure sense of the word, that we make judgments about other people by the way they look,
Yeah.
right?
It's so true.
And yeah, and the baggage that goes with that. I think that the responsibility that I feel and that I tell people is that, you know, I don't let it go, right? I mean, I'm not, you know, I hope I'm not, you know, aggressive about it, but I don't let it go.
Hmm.
So if someone says something in my presence, I call them on it.
Yes.
Not just because of my own situation, but obviously it's all inextricably linked. I'm in this situation because of how I feel and the choice that I made, right?
Man, that is so true. That is
Mm-hmm.
so true. It's just the choices we make that we have to live with and be
Mm-hmm.
happy with at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Fantastic.
And, you know, for me, it is a much richer life, right?
Yes.
And, you know, we're the same on the inside. I mean, we're not intellectually the same. We're not whatever. I'm not that ignorant, right? Myself. But, you know, there is a human connection, of course. I
Yeah.
don't know if you've seen that thing going around Facebook that it's like a white egg and a brown egg, and then it has it open cracked.
Yes. Oh, I love it. I love it. Thank
Yeah.
you
So,
so
you know,
much.
I think that you choose where you're going to stand up, right? And that it doesn't have to be a nasty confrontation.
It
It
does.
can be educating people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's about educating. You're so
It is
right.
about educating.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, because I've just ended a biracial relationship myself with a guy from Poland, and it's an
Oh,
interesting,
yeah. And they're white as white can be.
just so different, and it doesn't matter where we go. You have to keep explaining yourselves to people. Oh, I love it. But thank you so much, Jill. I'm so glad we connected and you took the time to come on board and inspire us today. I
Such a
will
pleasure.
touch once all of this is online.
Absolutely. Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
You're inspiring.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.